Yo, this is Jeremy from Handsome, Jets to Brazil, Cub Country, Helmet, Insight, and Iceburn. You're listening to the Rumors Are True podcast.
Welcome, this is Jeremy Allen Gould, and I'm coming to you today to confirm between God and of man that the rumors you have all heard are true. I started this podcast to have a platform for the bands and artists that I've worked with in the past, as well as new musicians and artists that influenced myself and many others. The Rumors Are True podcast is an opportunity for the artists to tell their story their way. I'm still in the business of confirming rumors. I still love a good conversation, and I still freaking love music. So thanks again for joining me on this journey, and I hope you like what you hear. With that said, the rumors are definitely true. Hey, welcome to this latest episode of the Rumors Are True podcast. My name is Jeremy, and today I welcome the legend Jay Robbins. You know Jay from the bands Jawbox, Burning Airlines, Government Issue, Channels, Rollicker Laydown, and Office of Future Plans, as well as his illustrious production career, which has been so awesome over the years, working with bands like The Promise Ring, Roadside Monument, and many, many others. So I hope you enjoy this latest episode with Jay Robbins. Jay, what is up, my friend? Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, thanks, Jeremy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you. I'm super honored to have you on. Been a fan for a very, very long time, and just really crazy to get to talk to you. I'm super honored you give me your time. And tell me, what's going on in your world? What's new in your world?
I mean, kind of the same things that have been new for a while. Like, I'm working on solo record number 3.
Oh, nice.
I just got invited to go. I'm going to my band currently, which is the band I've had for the last several years, which is myself and Pete Moffat on drums, who used to play drums in Burning Airlines, and we were in Government Issue together as well. Mm-hmm. So it's me and Pete, Brooks Harlan, who has sort of been my unofficial, not studio partner, but he runs an amp repair business we've all shared a space now for like probably 15 going on 20 years. And he's been playing bass with me since for a long time also. So anyway, so it's me, Brooks, and Pete. And we're going to Japan in April for a week, which is something that we've been dreaming of for a long time. And then I got invited to open all of the dates of the Sugar reunion.
I saw that.
Playing solo sets. So that is that I'm just like blown away by it. I'm really, really psyched about it.
Absolutely.
I really hope the Western world order can keep its shit together long enough for me to go tour Europe with Sugar.
Yeah, that's exciting, man. I saw that. That's cool.
Yeah. So there's a lot. And so I'm working on this record number 3 and really stoked about it. This band, learned a set of Burning Airlines tunes, and we're actually going this coming weekend. We're flying out to San Francisco to play on the Noise Pop Festival.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to do the Burning Airlines set at Bottom of the Hill, which is an awesome place in San Francisco that I guess has only got a year left on its lease, and then it'll be gone forever. But it's a really, really great. I mean, I have a lot of memories from playing at Bottom of the Hill over the years. So I'm psyched we're going to get to play there one more time.
That's awesome.
And so we're going to go Burning Airline sets in a Burning Airline set in California in San Francisco. But when we did this tour at the end of last year, that was all Burning Airlines material, and we got a really good multi-track recordings. So I'm trying to put together a live record that'll probably I'll probably put that up on Bandcamp. And I'm working on a solo acoustic record to take on tour with me, because I've done a lot of solo acoustic touring in the last couple of years, but my records are not like that. So whenever, like particularly like last year, I've toured now with Bob Mould, doing solo tours for a couple of years now, and it's always like super fun and seems to go really well. And then if people like, if I play my set and then people really like it, and they come to the merch table and they want to buy something, I have to like explain to them that this is like 100% not like what you just saw, like these are weird rock records. This is not me with an acoustic guitar. So I thought I would make a record that's just basically like the acoustic show. So if that's what somebody wanted to hear, then it would be represented, because I've been really getting into playing solo acoustic. I really, really enjoy it a lot. And
that's cool. That's
pretty
bare bones.
It's really, I love, like, it used to terrify me, and the more and more, like, I really love the immediacy of it. I just feel like it's about communication and like being in a moment with people, and like kind of it's the least bullshit that there is,
No, I get it, man.
Potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you mentioned Bob Mould. Were you ever a fan, obviously, of his old bands? Bring me through growing up for you. What were some of those first records that kind of impacted you, pushed you in the direction you wanted to? Was Bob Mould one of those bands, or one of his bands? I figured it sounds the excitement in your voice. I could tell.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, I always have been like super crazy about music, but when I was a kid, I never really got into rock and roll. I mean, punk music was the first rock and roll that I really felt like this was my music that I could relate to, because like before, which I basically, like, I was a soundtrack collecting kind of weird classical music nerd. I was super into films, horror and science fiction, but also just like filmmaking and claymation and stuff. And so a lot of my actual youth, I was like making weird little movies and like, kind of like improvising on the piano, and like had all this kind of creative energy and nowhere to put it. And meanwhile, like, so I was like a super weirdo basically. And the kids that were really into rock and roll were like the kids that kind of wanted to beat me up because there was no, was strange. So, so I just couldn't relate. I was like, rock and roll is the music of the kids that want to beat me up. Fuck that shit. I have my own thing. And, but, so I was always doing lots of drawings, weird, like, weird art and stuff. And I was in this art magnet and, ended up in this art magnet program in high school. And a few of the other kids in there were punk rock kids. And we kind of bonded over all the stuff that's not music, like weird art and weird movies and sci-fi and horror and stuff. And then they sort of adopted me and started taking me to shows. And I was like, and it was like going to this new world where things were possible all of a sudden, like I went from feeling like I had all this energy and nowhere to put it, kind of out in the suburbs, and there's a real clear definition of what normal is and what you have to do to like make your life work. And then over here, all of a sudden is this world with that people are just making up, and there's immediate things happening. And it's like, the people that are playing, you go see people playing music and it's like loud and insane and everyone looks weird and like, it's fun and like, it feels really free and crazy and like a little bit scary. And it just was, and the people that are on stage playing the music, like they're just the same people that are in the audience. Mm-hmm. So I was like, it completely changed my life, So, I mean, like the first show that I went to, the first real big show the first show I ever went to was this tiny show at a Chinese restaurant that was like a couple of my friends from the art class. And that was just them and their friends. And I was like, well, this is cool. It's like a little scene, like still very much on the outside of it. But I was like, wow, okay. But then I went and saw a government issue at Wilson Center in 1984. That was like GIs, TSOL, Marginal Man, and from either Kentucky or Tennessee, a band called STD. But that show, I was just like, my mind just exploded. I just like, I got like really, really hooked from that. And then I just started buying records and borrowing records, and people, my friends were making me tapes. So, and it was cool too, because their definition of punk rock was extremely loose. So it wasn't, so there was no, like one of the big things that I latched onto is like, there's no orthodoxy. There's no like normal of like, this is punk and that's not. Mm-hmm. Like there were people who had that attitude, but I think we all generally thought of those people who were like, who had a real orthodoxy about what's punk were kind of like ignorant, because the whole point is like, this was going to like blow up what's normal and make something new possible. Right. That was like, seemed like the mission of punk. Right. So, but yeah, so I was real influenced by my friends' tastes. So, we were listening to bands from DC, obviously, like Marginal Man and GIs, and Minor Threat, although I missed Minor Threat by about a week. I didn't like, they broke up like the week before I started going to shows. So, and bands like Big Boys. I got really into Midwestern bands, particularly Chicago and Minneapolis bands, because that was music that my friends didn't know so much. And it was like my attempt to like kind of have my own thing. So I was like, oh, if you guys like Marginal Man or Scream or whoever, like have you heard the Effigies? You should check out the Effigies, Black and stuff. So, I mean, that was kind of my time, like 84, 85. And then the sort of second wave or third wave of things started happening in DC, where the people who had been younger doing hardcore bands started to try and reinvent what they could do. And that became Revolution Summer. So I saw a lot of shows like Embrace, Rites of Spring, Dag Nasty, Beefeater, started going to punk percussion protests. And that was all. And basically at that same time, like one of the things that happened was I went to, I wanted to go to film school. I went to NYU for a semester, and it was awesome. But I really learned how much I wasn't ready to commit to that. Mm-hmm. And I blew all my money. And I was surrounded by people who were much more serious about making films than I was. And the most fun I had in New York was going out to shows and like going, like a lot of, like I liked a lot of the stuff that was happening at NYU, but my favorite classes were like film history and theory and stuff. And like, meanwhile, I was just like itching to do music. So I had one semester at NYU, and then I came home, and over the summer, I was like, I joined my friend's band. A friend of mine had left, was playing bass in a band with some friends of his, and that was called Punchline. It was kind of a suburban thrash band, very minor influenced. Never made a record, played very few shows, but I did play my first show with them, and then I was like, well, I'm probably going to end up having to go back to school. I better figure out what that looks like. And then I saw a flyer at the Smash, the punk rock record store in Georgetown in DC. There was a flyer taped to the cash register, and it had those little tabs, like with a phone number on it. Like it had about, 8 tabs or 10 tabs. And this flyer was like just a handwritten flyer and said, "Government issue needs a bass player."
Whoa.
And I went there with my friend, Damon, who was one of my kind of punk rock mentors. And I was like, wouldn't it be hilarious if I tried out for GIs? And then, I was like, he was like, you should, I'm like, should I just take one of these tabs? That would be, what do you think? I'll tear off a tab, right? Ha ha ha. We had a good laugh over it. Because also at that point, one of the things about GIs was like, they were still a very big band in the DC scene, but they sort of became a little bit uncool to like the sort of Discord fans, through just kind of like normal ways that things happen in music scenes. It was like, but anyway, I shouldn't say uncool, but they sort of were not, like this kind of core group of people had moved on and were trying something new.
Sure.
And they were always like, oh, one person leaves the band. Well, then it's not the same band. So the band just breaks up, right? That was like the famous legend of Washington, D.C. Like, you better catch this band now because they probably only got 3 shows before somebody quits and they're just break up. But GIs never, if somebody left, it's like,
let's replace
smell
them.
you later,
Yeah.
like don't let the door hit you on the way out. We're still doing this thing. And so I think so it was a little bit of a like, like a little bit of a joke, like, ha ha ha, have you played bass in Government Issue yet? Like who's playing bass in GIs this week? So that was the spirit. I took this tab and I was like, sure, I could play bass in GIs. Why not? Everybody else has. But then Damon was like, you should call him. And I was like, I thought about it. And the more I thought about it, I was like, I have nothing to lose by calling him. And then I called them and they were like, it turns out they practiced like 10 minutes from my house. And,
wow.
They were like, okay, come for Tuesday night or whatever. And I showed up and I fucking got in. And then I was
so
like,
wild.
What? Yeah. I mean, they really were one of my favorite bands.
What was that like?
They still are. Like,
what was that like joining
one of
your favorite bands?
I mean, so hard to describe in every way because it wasn't just, it was crazy on that level, but it was crazy also for me because like at that time, like I was 18 or 19 and I was really like super socially awkward. And so I was entering into this whole other world of like people that had history and associations and weird ways and like lived in group houses. And, it was like a huge step into what is it? What was the Obi-Wan Kenobi say in Star Wars, right? Congratulations, you've just taken your first step into a larger world,
Yeah.
Like, it was really like that. I was like, whoa, I had my mind. But I like the bass that I had at that time was a Fender Music Master, which is like a kid's bass. Like it's the bass you give your young kid when they're like learning all these records. It was like learning Joy Division bass lines and stuff, and John Cale and all these songs. I was trying to learn the bass on my own, right? And this was the bass I played in the one show I played in Punchline, and that's the bass I took to my GI's tryout. with this little tiny Fender amp. And then Tom from GIs, meanwhile, Tom had like, he was legendary for having kind of three Marshall half stacks, like just this massive loud sound. So I tried out with this like little pathetic, like kind of like bass rig, and I still got in.
That's incredible.
I don't. Yeah, and so Tom was like, he kind of like was like, we're gonna have to get you some real gear, and I was like, what do you mean real gear? And he's like, you need some real gear. So
like big boy gear.
Yeah, exactly. So it was pretty amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was that? Obviously you were in that band for a time. Do you feel like it really shaped you, molded you for the future, and kind of just bring me through that time?
I mean, hugely. I was when I joined GIs, the drummer was a guy named Sean Saley. He was the second drummer in GIs, but he wasn't in the band for very long. He left, and then Tom was like, we got to get Pete Moffat. And I was like, okay, who's that? Although it turns out I had seen Pete's band Dove open for Bad Brains once. And Pete, and even I remember seeing them, and I was like, we were all looking at Pete, just going like, holy crap, who's this drummer? Like, he's incredible. And so Tom invited Pete to join. Pete joined GIs, and he and I were in GIs for about 3 years. So I was the 9th bass player in that band, but I was the longest tenured bass player. No one else had toughed it out for a 3-year stretch. But it was amazing. I mean, Pete he was an amazing drummer. He was really able to like teach me how to think like a bass player in a rhythm section, which I had not thought about before. Like really listening and locking in with the kick drum and stuff. And it was cool because we were kind of like the young guys in this band. And so we had this energy to go do stuff that the band hadn't done as much before. So when we were in the band, we did 2 kind of 8-week-long U.S. tours and a bunch of shorter mini tours around the U.S. And we went to Europe I think that was like a 6 or 7 week tour. And we did a tour in the UK. And, we made a couple of records and like all like real mind expanding stuff. And Tom who, is an awesome guitar player and really great character, and he was like a crazy record collector. Like he made me some amazing comp tapes. So I got into some other stuff because of him that I wasn't familiar with, A lot of people were super into like, a lot of people that I knew, friends of mine, and also in the DC scene, were super into kind of British, not just British punk, but like the wave sort of immediately after the first and second wave of British punk. So like Buzzcocks, but other bands are more like Gang of Four and the Ruts and Killing Joke and the Slits and bands that were more sort of boundary pushing and weird sounding. And Tom had a massive record collection of all sorts of stuff. Though he's a huge Ramones fan, he loves like the Ramones, the Dictators, and stuff. But which I think you can kind of hear in GIs a little bit. So it was just like a really amazing time. And I think there was a point toward the end of the band where I think everybody started getting a little burned out. I think those guys were probably pushing 30. And feeling like they were getting a little bit wiped out. And I was kind of feeling like one of the great things in GIs was that they were really down to just have anybody in the band write material. Like nobody was super, Tom was the main song, music writer of the band, and John would always write the lyrics, but like, you could bring ideas and jam on them and it would turn into a song. So I started bringing lots of ideas. I just had loads of ideas. I just, music was kind of coming out of me, but I really started to learn about how the pieces might fit together, the pieces of a song.
Sure.
And what I liked and what I didn't like. And increasingly I was feeling like I can't really write songs on bass. I can't, because if I bring them, they get mutated into something that turns good, but it's different maybe than what I'm hearing in my head, and like just trying to like figure out what it means to really write a song. And so I started, and same thing with the vocals. Like John had a real specific style, and I always loved to sing. And Pete and I would do loads of backups and GIs, and singing felt good. And I started having, much that I had full songs in my head. I just had this almost physical like need to like try to come up with things and sort of steer the ship a little bit, and wanting to sing. And so I was like, I'm going to start learning guitar. And then, I was in Scream for a minute too, after GIs broke up.
Oh, nice.
I loved Scream. Also one of my favorite bands when I started going to shows. It just like, it's such an incredible band. And so like, I loved their politics, and their like energy, and, it's super cool music, and like, so there was a brief moment where, right after GIs broke up, Skeeter had quit Scream. The bass player had quit Scream for a little bit, and they needed a bass player. And I tried out, and I didn't get in. And then they went on tour with the guy who did get in, and he ended up quitting halfway through the tour, and they had nobody else. They called me, and they were like, "We're stranded in California. Can you help us out?" And wow. I was like, "Hell yeah, I can." So I quit my job, and I was working at this art supply store. I quit my job, and I got on a plane, and I went and played in Scream for 2 months. And that was amazing, because that's what Dave Grohl was their drummer at that point.
Jeez.
And their whole band was completely different than the GI's vibe. And that was super educational to me. And that kind of got to the end of I guess I was in that band for about 2 months. But I had increasingly had this feeling like, first of all, should I be a young guy who keeps joining old guys' bands? Or should I start my own band? Because that's the more real punk, like going out on a limb thing to do. And, I have this kind of music that's trying to come out of me, and it's not going to be right for Scream. If it wasn't right for GIs, it's sure not going to be right for Scream. Sure. And Scream isn't really Scream without Skeeter in it anyway. So I sort of parted company with them. Skeeter got back in the band. And then they broke up again, and Dave joined Nirvana. So that all worked out the way it was supposed to, I guess.
Wild.
But so then at that point, Kim Coletta and I were dating, and she was really dying to start a band, and I was dying to start a band. And so we were like, let's do this together. So and I had known Adam since I was our drummer at that time, since I was in high school, basically. So, and he wasn't doing anything. He was just playing drums in his basement. So
crazy.
I called him, and then we started Jawbox.
So where'd the band name come from?
Wind me up, I can go.
Where'd the band name come from, and kind of bring me through the beginning of that? I know you said you guys kind of came together and formed the band. What was the band in the beginning like? Was it a struggle to write music? Did it just start coming out? Kind of bring me through the beginning and where the band name came from.
The band name came out of a book called Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable. And we figured that if we were looking for a band name, and that this book is just like, it's all kind of colloquial terms that are sort of like, weird, like they're from like either kind of like old British, like outmoded British slang that isn't really used anymore, kind of old-timey slang words, not just American too. And we got some lyrics out of that book too, some things that like awesome. You kind of stick your finger in the book and find a word that feels weird and see what it sets off in your brain, right? And so I thought Jawbox was a cool looking word. It has an X at the end, and it could mean, I think it's Scottish slang. It could mean an open sewer. It could mean just yakking around the sink when you're doing the dishes after dinner. I thought it made me think of a television set, just like blah, 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 blah at you, and it looked kind of cool. And we were just like, you could be searching for a name forever, or you just pick a name and then that becomes the name that the band has. And so we were all right, it's Jawbox, off to the races. And really, I just think like at the beginning, it's so. I mean, I don't know if you've been in bands. I mean, perhaps I assume maybe you have. But you know that when you're young, like the thing about in GIs, right? I could write a bass line and sort of have an idea about two things that fit together pretty well, right?
Yeah.
But I wasn't really seeing the big picture. I could bring something to the band, and Tom almost immediately would be like, that's the verse, that's the chorus. Let's play these things, like he would know what he's going to play to it mostly, so he would have a sense of like a big picture. And so initially in Jawbox, it was harder to have a sense of the big picture, but that's sort of like the fun quest, which I still feel like every time I write a song, I feel like that's the quest. It's like, hear a thing in your head, or something comes up in a guitar and you're like, oh, where does this want to go? And then it's either when it's really going well, the thing tells you itself where it wants to go. And then you're like, something comes up and you're like, oh yeah, that's the right thing. Like, and you kind of get in a little bit of a trance about it. And then other times it's just like hard work of putting the thing together. And these two things, do they fit? Actually, they don't fit. Okay, shit. All right. Well, there's this wasted, like we got to come up with something else, So, and a lot of it is just sheer belief. So at the beginning, like it's just like believing, like faking it till you make it. And, but so, which is something that I didn't really learn to believe in until like even late in the experience of being in Jawbox. Like it's always like, yeah. So it's just, so the beginning is a lot of trial and error, or like there were some songs that I sort of like did kind of know how they should go, and some songs that I wouldn't know until we jammed on them. Sometimes Kim would bring bass lines and we just jam on that. And I'm like, in a way that's sort of easier because you're like, something's coming to you and you can kind of hear it. Like, yeah, I mean, it's fun to write songs. It's fun to like make music with your friends.
Absolutely, man.
So that's basically what it was like, with the occasional headache of like going into a blind alley or whatever. But, it was basically a pretty genial situation.
Yeah, that's awesome. You obviously wound up putting out 4 records. Kind of bring me through each of those individually, kind of your thoughts on them and maybe how you feel about them now looking back on them. And of course, you guys wound up signing to a major label. I'm sure that was probably a difficult decision in terms of the punk rock ethos of it all. Kind of bring me through that as well.
Well, the first recording we did was actually besides kind of basement, 4-track demos, we did an 8-track session with Barrett Jones, who had been Scream's front of house sound guy. And that we ended up releasing as a 4-song EP. And that was super fun because that's like the first time that it was like, for me, I was like, oh, this is my band, like making our first recording. And I had this experience with GI's studio experience, but like, Adam had never made a record. Kim had never made a record. So it was really like, and it turned out really good. I mean, I think at the time, like we were so stoked at how it sounded and hearing ourselves back sounding like a real band. And then Grip, which was, basically at that point, Kim was working at Discord. She was friends with Ian, and Discord is a very friendship oriented label.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a thing like, I wonder if Ian, sort of like, she could basically ask Ian, like, would you want to, as we were playing shows and writing songs and ready to make a record. And she's like, would you want to put our band out? And he was like, yes. So we did our first, we did Grip, full length record at Inner Ear with Eli Janney, who, had made a whole bunch of records that I recorded, a whole bunch of records that I really loved. Like he had worked with Soulside, he had worked with Scream. And it really seemed like Eli had in my mind, I was like, Eli has the sound. Like he's like, Eli makes the kind of records that sound like the kind of record, this is what I want our band to sound like,
Yeah.
And that it was super fun. He was so fun to work with. And, you know, in retrospect, I feel like that's the record of a very young band, kind of like, I could go down the song list and point at, you know, pick each song and go like, oh, well, this one's supposed to sound like Moving Targets. And this one's supposed to sound like, it was supposed to sound kind of like Big Black, but it didn't really turn out that way. And this one's supposed to sound like this other band. And here's our Scream song. And here's our, you know.
Trying to find your sound, I mean, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of that, I think, carried over into, you know, I mean, but there's a couple songs on there that I still think are pretty strong, and I'm, you know, I mean, I'm certainly proud of the record. And then like, between the first and second record, we got a chance to tour with Helmet, and which would have seemed like a strange pairing at the time for the kind of songs that we had, but they rubbed off on us so much. They were such fun to tour with. They were such solid dudes and like real characters. And the main thing I remember thinking too is like I had always had this thought about like complexity being good, or like, I don't know really where I was trying to go musically, but then to see Helmet and just their like sheer belief in these like monolithic riffs, you know, but then that they could take this like kind of brutal, compact kind of sound and then also have it be rich sounding and have some kind of musical dimension to it. And I don't know, they just really, really made a really strong impression. And you can absolutely hear it then, the record that we made after that tour, Novelty, our second record.
Great record.
There's some really blatant Helmet influence, you know, but not trying to just imitate their riff thing, but just basically it was like permission.
Oh yeah.
Like there's two things. The Helmet, for me, the Helmet tour and like the first Lemonhead single, Don't Want to Know If You're Lonely. Or no, that's Husker Du. Sorry. What is that song called? The
big one?
No, the first Lemonhead single, the hell is that song called?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Oh, Jesus. Man, I'm having a senior moment.
Yeah, it's all good.
But anyway, the point of that, it's a single that came out before their first Lemonheads record,
okay.
But songs on the first record. But I think it's called Don't Want to Know. Anyway, it's like hearing that you could do something very simple and direct, and that it could still have some, like, it wouldn't seem stupid, you know, it would still have some dimension to it. And like, but you know, it's like for me, this is me personally, I'm like, oh, the first Jawbox record feels kind of wishy-washy, and Novelty is like, let's not be wishy-washy anymore.
No, I get that.
And then the other thing that is was really important in the Novelty times is that we met Ian Burgess, who was this British guy who lived in Chicago, who produced tons of our favorite records. I mean, particularly like my favorite records. Like Ian was a guy who was around at the birth of kind of Chicago punk and what became, it wasn't really hardcore yet, but it was more like Chicago punk scene. So Ian recorded a bunch of Naked Raygun records. He was kind of Steve Albini's engineering mentor. He recorded Big Black a bunch, all the Effigies records, Breaking Circus, Rifle Sport, all these great Midwestern bands that I really love. And he recorded a few Pegboy records after that.
Oh, cool.
But so we played a show with Pegboy in outside of Chicago, and Ian was running their sound. And so we met him at that show, and we were like, oh my God, wouldn't it be cool to record with Ian Burgess? So we asked him, would he want to produce us? And he said yes. So he came down and we did Novelty at Inner Ear, but instead of Ian Mackay being involved, or Don being engineering, Don Zientara engineering, who had done all or Eli, I mean, basically Ian and Don had done almost all the recording of the Discord bands up to that point. And I think we were one of the first bands that was like, well, we know this guy who we really want to work with. And he came down and like, you know, slept on my couch and like recorded that record, and was just like, it was so awesome to work with him. And so, you know, he's a real hero of mine. So that was pretty huge for us. And then when we went to do the third record, that was the point at which all the bands from the underground were getting swept up in the Nirvana thing. And so majors were sort of sniffing around, because we were a very hardworking band. We probably toured more than most of the bands on Discord at that point. I think the touringest band on Discord was probably Fugazi. Scream might be a close second, but at that point they might have not even been together anymore, because they wouldn't have been at that point. But so really, us and Shudder to Think, maybe Dag Nasty, although Dag Nasty was also gone from the Discord fold at this point. But basically, you know, there were a lot of other bands in DC, this huge, like, you know, network. It was such a vital scene, but a lot of those bands were really only interested in playing in DC, or they would go play weekends in the East Coast a little bit, but they didn't really get out and like tour their ass off. And sometimes if they did, like maybe they went to Europe, and then invariably they would come back from Europe and break up.
Yeah.
But we were out hitting it really hard. Like, we loved to tour. We loved to like do our band. So consequently, and I think also because Kim was such a well-organized, you know, you always need someone like this in a band who really can run the business of the band and has an idea about how to make things happen, you know, which was never me. I was always just like music nerd, but like, so we were a fairly successful band on Discord. And so I think the majors, you know, I think us and Shudder, I think, were the sort of highest profile bands, and Nation of Ulysses to an extent, I guess, but they were sort of in their own thing.
Sure.
But anyway, when the majors started sniffing around and it was clear they couldn't sign Fugazi, I think they were like, okay, who's the next, we're going to get a Discord band. Who's the next ones down in the tier, you know? And so it was kind of like politically, I think we were always super skeptical about the idea, but it so happened that Atlantic Records, it just was basically everything lined up in a way that we ended up feeling like we couldn't, if we didn't take the opportunity, we would regret it.
Yeah.
You know? And versus taking the opportunity and regretting it, which I think is something that was generally how I thought it would go down, you know? Like, for the most part, I went into the idea thinking, if we do this, it's going to ruin everything. But in the case of Atlantic Records, the A&R guy who approached us was Mike Gitter, who was a guy that we had known, Kim knew from growing up in the Boston hardcore scene. He did Triple X fanzine. He had been in bands. He'd been around.
Yeah, so he understood it.
Yeah. He's like a real, you know, he was from the world we were from, and he was using his new A&R job to try to help bands that he believed in. So he was really quite, you know, he was sincere. And so that was huge. And it felt like, okay, when we say Discord Records to Mike Gitter, he really knows what we mean. Mm-hmm. Versus a couple of the other people who had to talk to us where it's like, was clearly kind of lip service and a little bit, you know, was disingenuous. So with Gitter involved, and we were able to say to Atlantic Records, here are the terms under which we would sign a contract. You know, we basically said, here's what we want. We called it our list of impossible demands. Like within our group, we were like, if they will meet our impossible demands,
well, then we're doing it.
We would be stupid not to do this. And they just met them.
That's awesome.
So, and I think because I think it's just timing. It's just good luck, because it was in this moment where Nirvana had exploded. And I think that the majors were like, we don't really understand what, they had come out of an authentic cultural underground, like something that was really grassroots, that had grown up without, it wasn't a product. It was authentic and weird and a little bit and out of control. And people from the normie world could not parse it. Mm-hmm. But they knew that they could make a shit ton of money off of it based on what happened with Nirvana. And so I think there was a golden moment where the majors were like, we don't know how any of this works or why these bands are popular. So we need to, but we got to get in now, and we should just let them do their thing the way they are going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that lasted 3 to 6 months. And that was the window in which we were lucky enough to put out "We're Your Own Special Sweetheart."
Great record,
because I'm so proud of that record.
Yeah,
and particularly because musically, it is such a fuck you to to the expectation of what is supposed to happen when a band signs to a major label. It was our most cohesive sounding record. It's a weird ass record. It has some songs that only have their own internal logic. They're not like, so, and we put our foot down, but they wanted us to re-record a song that was on Novelty, because I think they felt like it was the most exploitable sounding song. And we were like, no, we already recorded that song. And it was cool because we got to work with Ted Nicely, who had done, most of the Fugazi records, who we really looked up to. Was super, super fun, very grueling experience, because Ted was extremely detail-minded. So I feel like, and for the first time, we had a lot of time to make a record. We thought we were going to do it really fast because we thought we were tight. But Ted really brought out the microscope. And it's to his credit, I think, that with the amount of detail orientation that went into just trying to capture, represent the songs, mm-hmm. I feel like that record doesn't sound overworked or stale sounding. It still sounds pretty lively, like we're there. It's not worked to death. It doesn't sound worked to death, but in reality, it was worked to death. I learned a lot of very awful lessons on that record about how terrible of a guitar player I was, and what an inadequate singer.
Oh my!
And and not, and Ted was super gracious about it and very hardworking and very patient with me. But it was great. I learned, it was a real boot camp, and I learned a lot from him, those lessons. I also was the studio is really where I love to be in the studio. And I really, that came into focus for me making that record. So I learned a lot from Ted that I was able to then apply. I've been able to apply, ever since then. And so it was very hard work to do that record, but we were super happy with how it turned out. And we got our, 3 to 6 months in the sun. We toured with Stone Temple Pilots. Jeez. We played at Red Rock. We did a lot of great stuff. And at the end of which, but in our minds, it was wonderfully successful, because it did accomplish the thing. It accomplished one of the things that we thought would hopefully happen when we signed, which is just to reach more people.
Sure.
So nowadays you're lucky if you sell 500 to 1,000 records. Back then, I think on Discord we sold 25,000 records, which is just amazing. And then,
sure.
But then on Atlantic, we never got a good accounting, but we think maybe Sweetheart probably sold 60,000 records. So for us, it's a massive success in this huge increase of our, people heard us who would not have heard us before. and particularly when we toured with Stone Temple Pilots. And what's cool is like those people, even now, because it's never really about like quote unquote fans. It's like the music connects with people, and if it means something to them, that's meaningful. And so some of those people are friends now, and some of them only heard us because we opened for Stone Temple Pilots, and we were like a bridge for them to get into way weirder, more underground music and discover something authentic. And so it worked out really great. But for Atlantic Records, say we sold 60,000 records, I'm sorry, but that's a failure.
Yeah.
For the amount of what they put into it and what they thought they were expecting or whatever. So after that record, their enthusiasm noticeably dimmed. It cooled quite a bit. And so the fourth Jawbox record was made kind of with the understanding that the writing was a little bit on the wall. And but we felt like one thing about Jawbox, whether we were ever a good band or not, or whether anybody thinks we're good or whatever, we worked our asses off, and we always tried to expand the palette, or expand like what we were doing creatively. We were never trying to do the same thing over and over again. And and I think that's why I could say this or that about any of the records, but I'm really proud of them all, because I feel like we were always trying. We were even if our reach exceeded our grasp,
sure,
we were reaching.
Yeah.
And so the last record we did with John Aniello, who is another producer hero of mine, who had worked with Dinosaur Jr. and Screaming Trees and Chavez, which was a big,
great band.
That was a big motivation for me. Like I love those records. And John was amazing to work with, and he's a fantastic individual. And we had so much fun making that record. And in a sense, it was the opposite. In a way, we took all of the boot camp type experience that we had making For Your Own Special Sweetheart and internalized all of that. So we were much more picky pants about all the details. John's much more rock and roll. Mm-hmm. So we would do a take, and he'd be like, because we all endeavored always to play everything together. That's the way that we wanted to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. As opposed to the bands record where they want to do one instrument at a time and
sure,
kind of construction project. But we would do a take, and then we'd come in the control room, and John would be like, "Yeah, that was great. You guys, that really rocked." And then we'd listen back, and we'd be like, "Oh, John, didn't you hear I was rushing in the second verse? Do you hear where I pulled that chord out of tune?" And then he kind of dropped a hit there. This take will never do. We have to do it again. So we were like much more intense. Like I think it cracked him up, because I think we were probably the most intense band that he ever worked with in that way. Like really critical. You were prepared
at that point.
we were over prepared. But but it was super fun. He was so fun to work with. So we made that record. We were really proud of it, and and then we basically it came out to the extent that it existed physically. Like there were physical copies of the record. But the label had already washed its hands. So, so we sitting around for, we toured a bit, toured with Not a Surf. That was cool, but
great
kind
band.
Of strange combo. Yeah. Great band. Not at that time. It was a bad combination, because, they had been semi-famous for a minute because of that song Popular.
Yeah.
Which was fortunately like a novelty hit. So the only people that, they had these massive shows when that song was a hit single. And then after that, that song is like an outlier for them. Like they're a much smarter, more nuanced, they're a deep band. They're great. But it's like they were making music that couldn't connect with normies the way that Popular did. And so they're people, it was like they were briefly huge, and then they were just back to their normal thing again. But yet people that would want to come out and see Jawbox at that time might only have known Nada Surf as the popular band, and they would want to stay away. So it really was it was a shame, because they were lovely people and a great band, and it was cool to play with them and be on tour with them, but
Absolutely,
it didn't
man.
sort of work. But anyway, so yeah, we got dropped, and we were like, well, that's fine. What do we do next? And at that point, Zach, our drummer, Zach Barocas, who had been our drummer since we wrote the songs for Sweetheart, and who really reinvented the sound of the band by having a really strong musical personality as a drummer, right? I mean, he's ended up sounding the way it sounded because of his vision rhythmically. Like, it changed everything about, and it changed the process of how we even wrote songs. So we wrote a lot of songs around his beats. So he was basically irreplaceable. And at that point he was like, we've done a whole lot. We've hit it really hard for a long time. I think I need to go back to school. He moved to New York. He started going to college, and we were just like, we can't really replace Zach, and nor do we want to. And maybe this thing has run its course. So that was the of the band. But I was still writing stuff and wanting to do stuff. So that's where Burning Airlines picked up from there almost immediately.
Real quick, was that difficult when the band ended for you, or was that a relief of sorts? And also, kind of bring me through the legacy and the impact of the band. I mean, you Deftones are covering you guys, like, that's huge. Like, kind of bring me through your thoughts on the end of the band, and of course the legacy and the impact of the band.
I mean, at the end, the end of anything, when you put kind of 8 years of your life into it with such intensity, it's bound to hurt. But it also, it was just a real mixed bag. It's like, it's a crisis, and it's also an opportunity. It's like, okay, well, then now is, like, for example, the end of, one of the things that was often tricky in Jawbox in writing songs is that Bill, who was the other guitar player, Bill was so creative and such a great guitar player, and also it was like 4 very strong personalities. And so Bill and I, a lot of times when we were writing guitar parts, it would feel like we're writing against each other rather than together. And some of that tension turned out to make, musical tension, ended up making for something really cool neither one of us could have thought of individually. But sometimes it was just a pain in the ass, because we're both filling the same space, fighting for dominance with contradictory ideas. So so it was interesting, because it would make me, sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't have to be the main guitar player in this part. I can come up with something that decorates around the edges, like it's cool. It expanded my thinking about what I should do on the guitar, in the same way that, like, writing with Zach would expand my thinking, because he would often be quite, he wouldn't, if he had an idea about the drums, he wouldn't budge on it, and you couldn't tell him what to play.
Sure.
So you ended up having to, and that makes you think on your feet, and that's ultimately good. So, but it was, it was a kind of a headache sometimes, where Bill and I are like fighting over the same space. And at the same time, like, he's really great, and I really admire his musicality and his thinking. And I knew that he was a great bass player. So I was like, next band I do is going to be a 1 guitar band, and I should see if Bill wants to play bass, because then there's room for us to riff off of each other all we want, and we've each got our own territory, and it will just be fun, instead of being like, whose song is this anyway? And like, that's exactly what writing and Burning Airlines together, and it was super fun and cool. So it's like the opportunities happen, but I think, at the time it was a drag, but culturally, the end of the band was, it was like, oh, the wind's really out of the sails. What a drag. What's supposed to happen next? And it also was the end of the sort of grunge boom. So I think there was kind of culturally a little bit of a feeling of like, there was like, when Nirvana was when the Nirvana wave first broke, it's like you could turn on the radio and hear lots of music that sounded like shit that you liked. You know, a lot of it also
Yeah.
was garbage, but like there was a lot of weird. There was more weird music in the popular sphere than you were used to hearing, and it was like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, you know, you couldn't help but feel enthusiastic about it. Like, oh, the whole world. I mean, it's so naive to say it, but it's like, oh, the whole world is changing. Like we're bringing all these ideas from the underground, and now it's going to change the
Mm-hmm.
mass culture, and it's going to change attitudes and change the world. And you don't think that kind of stuff consciously, I think, but you can't help having it in the back of your mind. And then,
Sure.
you know, the reality is when a big corporation ceases to profit from something, they fucking drop it like it's hot. They were just like, nope, all right, done with that. And and when that happens in the pop culture world, then, you know, they invest money in something else, and all of those other things are yesterday's news. And which is just one of the many horrific things about late capitalism, because it's all insincere bullshit. But like, but so I think everybody was, I think, around, and even people who were like super serious, like underground warriors, who were like, nope, we're not, you know, we're fighting to keep our patch, like
Mm-hmm.
this thing we've created, our thing, and it's real, and we're going to sustain it, and like popular culture be damned. I think even those people felt a little bit of like, oh, just kind of exhaustion, you know. I think
Mm-hmm.
it was in the air a little.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I mean, for me, I'm like, I need to make music, so
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
gonna make music. So
Yeah.
that's always been feeling. So, however it works out. But yeah, so I don't know if that covers it or not. I mean, I think as far as legacy, that's a pretty heavy duty word. I mean, I just think like what I learned from being in Jawbox, and I carry on learning now, is that you go out and do this kind of thing. And I learned it from being in GIs too, and just from meeting people who were into the punk music scene and weird art scenes around the world and stuff. And it's like you create something, and that's the beginning of a conversation with people, and they pick it up, and you know, it's like the ball goes back and forth, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what you want, is like everybody trying to keep the ball in the air, you know, like so I think all of the people I know who were in bands at that time, and who are still in bands, you know, that's what you want to do. Like, it's not like the idea about like being a rock star is like ridiculous to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's, and I've known people who have, I mean, it's not ridiculous. It's not fair to say that, because I've known plenty of great people who were like, oh, the punk scene is my springboard to doing what I really want to do, you
Sure.
know?
Sure.
And that means a calculation about, you know, like quote unquote getting big, or being some version of a star or whatever. And like, that's never been the point to me. The point is like that we're all here kind of reminding each other that we're really alive, and that we're vital,
Yeah.
and we have things to share with each other. So, so it's like a network thing that you have to keep alive, and you got to keep, the ball has to keep bouncing back and forth, you know? So, and I think, you know, like most of the people that people that I know from bands from then and now, it's like, that's I'm really happy that it's happening in whatever form it's happening. So
Yeah.
if that's a legacy, then that's what it, that's what I would say,
Absolutely, man. Well, yeah, I just think the influence, on a lot of bands, and of course, you mentioned your For Your Own Special Sweetheart. That was such a big record for a lot of people. I mean, they all were really overall, but it's like, you guys definitely had that influence. Like I said, Deftones covering Savory. I mean, that's huge, and they're bigger than they've ever been right now, which is insane. But
that's pretty wild. I
yeah,
actually met a guy who ran a luthier shop next door to my studio for a while. When we were doing we were getting ready for the Jawbox reunion shows in 2019. I think he heard us playing Savory, and I went next door to his shop, and he was like, "That's your song?" And I was like, "Yeah, I wrote that song." And he's like, "Oh my God, that song's so important to me, but I only know the Deftones version. I had no idea that had anything to do with you."
Unbelievable.
And I'm like, "Oh my God, yeah, yeah." It's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. That's cool though. And it's a great cover too. So it's like, a great band doing a great song.
I mean,
I'm sure that makes you feel great.
yeah, no. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I think it's Jonah Matranga's. I think Jonah Matranga is the reason that they did it, because Jonah's band Far. Toured, and they think he hipped them to that song, and then they ended up doing it. Two bands did it together as a cover on the tour. Like, I think they did something like one band would start playing the song and Jonah was singing it, and then one by one the members would change when there was a break, till it was then their band finishing the song.
That's cool.
Something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, your next endeavor is Burning Airlines, which you mentioned earlier. Great band as well. Sounds like you kind of, like you said, took the reins in terms of having, being the primary songwriter or the primary guitar player, if you will. Kind of bring me through Burning Airlines and what that was like for you, the records you put out, and the time in that band.
I mean, I loved it. I mean, I can try and be brief. I mean, it was cool because it meant I asked Pete Moffat to play drums, and so it meant reconnecting with him.
Yeah.
Making music with him again was super cool. Everything we did with Bill was great. I mean, it was also my first experience really recording my own band, which was part of the project for me. Was like, at that point I was starting to do a lot of production, working with other bands, but I didn't have engineering chops so much. I was more like a coach and a guy with opinions and sort of musical guidance from that side of things. What I really wanted to be also doing the kind of nuts and bolts part of it. So Burning Airlines was really my opportunity to kind of do that and make the studio a part of the band,
Yeah.
That's how I saw it anyway. And, so, I mean, it was great. It was like super fun growth thing. And it also was a little bit frustrating because Bill, when he joined the band, was very clear that he wasn't about to embark on another Jawbox sized endeavor. He was like, I'd love to make music with you and Pete. That'll be really awesome. I'm not going to tour, And at that point I was like, well, that's fine. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But we did end up crossing that bridge because, it started coming together. I always go into anything kind of being like, okay, we'll see how this works out. And then when it starts to work out, I get really excited. Mm-hmm. And so, this is coming together better than I imagined. Like, why would we not want to tour? And so it became very clear that Bill couldn't really stay. We did our first record, Mission Control, with Bill, and thank you. And then it was pretty clear that we wanted to tour and he didn't want to tour. So Mike Harbin stepped in on bass and became our bass player, and we started writing with Mike and touring a lot more. We did a tour in Europe with Braid, where our friend Charlie Bennett played bass, but Mike was really the guy. And we basically, and that was amazing. We went to Europe again. We went to Japan twice.
Wow.
We toured with Promise Ring, with Braid, with Rival Schools. It was super, and this was concurrent with me getting to do a lot of production work. And so it was just really exciting, like fulfilling time. And unfortunately, it's weird to say this without seeming, well, we were on tour with Rival Schools on September 11th.
Oh, wow.
And September 12th was not a good time to be in a band called Burning Airlines.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of limped through the rest of that. At first we were like, we should just go home maybe. And then we're like, well, we don't know what, it was like one of those, and you're just like, I mean, unfortunately we experienced this since September 11th. You don't seem to be able to avoid these kind of experiences. It seems like every other week something happens that's just like, oh, well, now reality is completely reshaped and I don't know where the fuck I stand anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? Or where this is all going. Now it's just the normal. But like then, it was super not normal. Sure. It was like we thought we knew how things worked, and now there's a rupture, and we have no idea what the fuck is supposed to happen next. And I think we were just like, do we go home? Do we cancel the rest of the tour? And we're like, well, the one thing that we know is we're here with our instruments and we can play shows and the tour is booked. So unless we find out the tour is canceled, we should just keep playing. So we actually played a show the night of September 11th. That turned out to be a great thing to do because we were in Arizona. I mean, it was so fucked up because we were trying to call people that we knew who might be, sure. People in New York, people in DC, and no calls were able to get through. Mm. But one thing that was cool about playing that show, we played in Tempe, Arizona, and nobody knew what to do, and people just came out just to be with other people.
Yeah, to do so something, get their minds off it.
Yeah, at least we're all together thinking about it instead sure. of like being home in your house just going like, what the fuck? Sure. So, but the rest of the tour, it really, everything after, I mean, we broke up before the end of the year, really. And I think it was just that feeling of like, what are we even supposed to do next? Yeah. I've never really thought of like, I couldn't catalog all the things, all the reasons that we, that would lead to us deciding to break up. But we ended up, we did that tour. And then right afterward, we did some dates with a Japanese band called Not that, NAHT. They were a super cool band. And they had brought us to Japan the first time we went to Japan. And they had sponsored a bunch of tours for bands from DC in Japan. And we were like, let's be the band that brings them to the USA finally. Cool. Let's return the favor. So, but unfortunately, we had all this planned. It was just like an East Coast run. And the plans were all set. But it was the October right after September 11th.
Sure.
So it just was like a wash. It was just a real letdown of a tour. Like, I mean, they were psyched and it was fun, but it was just, nobody was going out and the whole thing was just, it was a bummer. And so I think we just
read the writing on the wall or,
Well, kind of like it made it not, it made it kind of not fun to be in a band. It was just a like super intense uncertainty about everything.
Sure.
And we were like, let's take a little bit of a break. And then we'll see in, 6 weeks, we'll kind of like get together again and, see what we want to do. And then we just never came back from our 6-week break.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, that was that. But then at that time also, I was married. So I was kind of not wanting to tour as much.
Sure.
I'd gotten married and, we were trying to buy a house and I was doing a lot more production work. And so it was harder to kind of like juggle all the things. And so I was like, okay, the adventure now is at home. That's where the adventure is.
Yeah,
I'm going to
totally.
like be excited about, so, and then, so my wife and I moved to Baltimore and we bought a house and I started my own studio and, started playing again, but then, and that was, Channels was the band. And that started, because Janet, my wife, and I had been talking about making music together. And then Darren Zentek, who was one of my favorite drummers of all time and one of my favorite people of all time, I just saw him one day, and
That's
he was
awesome.
like, "Hey man, you want to jam?" I was like,
Yeah.
at first I was like, no, I couldn't. And then I was visiting him at work, and I walked out the door, and then I was like, wait, Darren just asked me if I want to jam. Like,
That's awesome.
why would I say no? That's Darren. Like,
That's
so I went back
awesome.
in. I was like, yes, definitely jam.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and that's really my favorite band, maybe, that I've ever
Wow.
been in. I mean, just love. I mean, but it's all sort of part of a continuum for me at this point, because, you know, I mean, the thing with Channels was that we, I think we all really loved being in that band, and we had this great sense of trust and camaraderie, and like, I'm so proud of the music that we made together. And sometimes it was like we could play and start with nothing, and then something would come out and you just don't even know where it came from, you know?
Yeah.
It was really a wonderful band. And then my Janet and I, our son Callum was born, and we thought we were going to, okay, well, now we need to take a break from the band for a while. And then we received Callum was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy.
Oh, wow.
At 6, and which was a severe neuromuscular. It's sort of like an extremely rare form of muscular dystrophy. So at that point, I was like, well, I shouldn't be doing music, so we really, our lives were. I mean, Callum passed away in 2020.
I'm so sorry.
But his life expectancy, when he at his diagnosis, they thought he wouldn't live past the age of 2, and he made it to 14 and a half. And he was an extraordinary person. So, so we were lucky. We had an amazing, almost 15 years with him. And so that's, that was like a major life shift.
Absolutely.
But I did, that's a huge subject to even get into.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
But he was so he was wheelchair bound for his entire life. He never walked, but he was verbal, and he was extremely, extremely smart and curious, and like an amazing person, amazing little teacher. And but one thing that happened was when he got his diagnosis, and we were trying to figure out what to do, and it was kind of like a bomb got dropped on our lives. I was like, well, for me to do music right now would be completely selfish and wrong. And so I sort of was like, I'm going to do my job, which is, I have the studio. I'm lucky that people are coming to work with me. I'm going to find a way to make that work, but I shouldn't be spending any time making music.
Sure.
And I made so that was a conscious decision. And I was pretty miserable. Like I really started to feel like, wow, I'm really not myself. And then bit by bit, I was finding ways to, like, over time, kind of, okay, well, everyone's asleep now, but I'm still awake. So I'm going to take 45 minutes because I have this song idea in my head.
Sure.
I'll just stay up late and do a little demo. And then and the minute that I started figuring out how I could carve out time to do that, I really felt like, I'm myself now. And I think it was better for everybody. And I think there's a thing, it was better for my family. Like, and it's, I mentioned this just in light of, like, I think there's a thing that people have about having kids, or just about getting older in general. Like, I've seen this happen with my friends, and to an extent a little bit with me, where you reach a certain age and you're like, oh, now I have to put aside, I had this thing that I cared about that I had my whole heart in it, but it's a childish thing. It's selfish, or it's not, like you might know that it's important to who you are, but you have this cultural conditioning. Maybe it doesn't happen so much anymore, but in my generation, it for sure happened, where you're like, oh, there's cultural conditioning that's like, yeah, but now it's time to grow up. I got to grow up and get a real job. This is the thing that people always say about bands, right? Oh, when are you going to get a real job? And so you're like, now I have to put aside the childish thing and I have to do the grown up thing. And I mean, I think it was true for my parents. Like, my parents were miserable a lot of the time when I was growing up. They were excited about my creativity, but partially because they didn't make any time for their own creativity. And they had, and particularly my mom had outlets in her youth, but then she's like, no, now I have a family. Now I have to get real. And so she stifled everything, and she became like a monster. And I think that that creativity is so important. It's so important to being a person, like your innate creativity. It's like, basically you got to be who you fucking are. And especially if you're raising children, like they need to see the example of the person being of an authentic person who's being authentic to themselves,
Sure.
So it was extremely difficult to find a good balance where, and always it was like, family is number one. But it was, anyway, it's a huge subject. I'm probably already going.
No, you're fine. I just want to tell you, I appreciate your transparency and your vulnerability. I can't imagine going through that. So thank you so much for opening up like that. I know that's difficult. I can tell in your voice.
I appreciate it. It's like what actually happened.
No,
and it's not even scratching.
I can't imagine. I have children myself, so I definitely, and they've got some medical issues, so I definitely can relate to that portion of it. But, it's, being a father, being a husband is like paramount. And the older you get, I think you kind of just realize what really matters, and, creativeness, and it's part of who you are. But like that father, being that father is everything to that child. So it's like, you are, and it's one of those things where it just affects you completely, up and down, over, right and left. So thank you so much for opening up. I really appreciate that.
No, that's well, thank you. I back at you, I mean, I think for us also, we had a child who, we didn't have the option of being, we did not have the option of being a laissez-faire parents. Our child required 100% of our time. He had a priority because there was no alternative. But I got to say also, one thing that I'm really grateful for is that people, when Callum was diagnosed, Kim Coletta started a fundraiser, and then people kind of word sort of spread about it, and people were incredibly supportive, because this was a condition like spinal muscular atrophy. When we got the diagnosis, the doctors who we were talking to were even like, this condition is going to bankrupt you. And luckily we live in Maryland, which has a very strong, or at least at the time had a very strong safety net for people in exceptional medical circumstances. But we had a lot of financial help from people in the music scene. People did benefits.
That's awesome.
It was really, it was really humbling and really, beautiful, and also really necessary, because we like I said, it's a long story.
Sure.
It's a whole other.
No, I totally get it. Absolutely, man.
But it also, that's another way in which I feel like being part of this, finding this music world and this community that has a real sense of community, and being a part of it. It's like, I'm immensely grateful for it.
That's awesome. So, I love that. I know you wound up doing Roll Kicker Laydown and Office of Future Plans as well, as outlets.
Well, Well, so Roll Kicker Laydown was actually a thing that happened right when GIs broke up. That's the last two songs that Government Issue
I
wrote.
didn't realize that. Okay.
And and we recorded them. So it was before. It wasn't. It was between. I think I can't remember when I guess we recorded them around a little bit before Jawbox recorded Novelty.
Okay.
Tom and Pete and I got together, relearned those tunes because I always loved those songs, but we never quite finished them. But it was kind of unfinished business of Government Issue. So I lobbied pretty hard to like get Tom and Pete back together and kind of finalize those songs.
That's cool.
And then we recorded them. And then when Ian Burgess was in town working on Novelty, we got him to mix them. And then we put out that 7-inch kind of at that time, but it was a real limited, like it was a self-released limited 7-inch. But we play those songs now. We play one of them. Pete and Brooks and I play one of the tunes. But yeah, so and then the other, to talk about Office of Future Plans, that was the result of those when I first started doing demos again. And eventually I kind of had enough stuff to think about making a record, and I was scared of the idea of making it a solo record. But at first I was just like talking to Darren, and I was like, okay, well, there's a dark day at the studio and we have this kind of time, and it was sort of hard to schedule things, but I basically, and at that point Janet and I had developed a more, it was a couple of years down the line, so we understood how we could schedule things to make it work for Callum. And so Office of Future Plans initially was just a recording project where Darren and I would get together, and then that's when Brooks started playing bass with us, and it was all about just trying to record those songs. But I developed a friendship with Gordon Withers at that point too, and so Brooks and Darren and Gordon, was getting together with those guys to record these songs, and it just felt like a band. Yeah. And I was like, wow, gosh, I'm in a band again, like I've done other projects. I've done, Darren and I did a project with Vic Bondi, who had been the singer in Articles of Faith. We had a band called Report Suspicious Activity that did 3 records. 2 of them were on Alternative Tentacles, and one of them on Arctic Rodeo, and we played a little bit, but we didn't really tour much. We played a few shows.
Yeah, I have to check that out.
Eric Deno from Carolina was in the band too. Yeah, but it was all extremely piecemeal, very part-time-ish, like little surgical strike moments of music making.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. Plans kind of, we didn't tour. We weren't going to tour. We played a few shows here and there. And I was like, this is a band that could probably write by jamming, and that would be really cool. But it never coalesced. We never got to that stage because even though everyone is so great musically and I admire them and I felt like, something can really happen here, we never were able to put in the time to make something happen. And then in the meantime, I'd been writing simpler and simpler songs that I was just like, I want to do these songs that to me are much more like boom, this is the song. Like it's a much more thing. And I started to feel uncomfortable that I'm like, well, if this is a band, and also it takes me about a year to write, it takes forever to write lyrics. So even if music comes out in a shot, I could write a song with a band, or I could show a song to a band, and all the music ends up being there one way or another. It gets there, and then it's finished, and then they're waiting around for months for me to write words that I can sing. And I started to feel like this crazy pressure where I was just like, these guys are just waiting on me, and we're dead in the water until I do something, and I just need to not. It starts to make me crazy. So I was just like, let's not do this band anymore. And then that way I can just focus on what's right in front of me and worry about writing a song that I can stand behind. And if it takes me 6 months, the lyrics, no one else has put out, So that's sort of what the transition from doing Office of Future Plans to just making records under my own name. And then I'm like, if I do that, then it can be anything I want.
Absolutely.
I can play with anyone I want. Style of thing. It could take 4 years to come out, or it could take a year.
People aren't waiting on you. Yeah.
And no one, it's like, especially at this age, people have demands and they have, it's like, and I basically want to do it if it's fun.
Sure.
Sure. So, and or if I get on some kind of crazy mental agenda, which I definitely have about songwriting, it's not, it's nobody else's business until I've done what I can do. And then I can share it. And I work up with other people, then they can mutate whatever they want, because I'm coming from a place of already knowing what I can bring to. So it's, basically, I'm old, but I'm still like a kid in that thing. Like,
yeah, man.
Figured out.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to touch on your production career briefly. I know we've went a little longer than expected, so I appreciate your time. Just want to talk about.
We'll see if anybody.
What's that?
We'll see if anybody's still listening at this point.
Oh, they are. Trust me. I know you've worked with so many great bands over the years. Life and Times, Texas is a Reason, Promise Ring, Braid. You mentioned Jets to Brazil. Roadside Monument, good friends of mine. I know those guys pretty well. Me Without You. Yeah. Man, there's so many bands. Kind of bring me through that. I know you mentioned, during Burning Airlines, starting that production career, and you kind of mentioned how Ian Burgess was you knew his sound, and, you wound up being a producer. People knew your sound. So kind of bring me through that production career, kind of some highlights from that.
Well, I mean, it goes back to before, in my mind, like my obsession with it goes back to before Government Issue. I mean, it goes back to honestly, listening to the Star Wars soundtrack as a 10-year-old, sitting on the floor and being hearing the way that music could evoke a kind of emotion, and hearing where, you put headphones on, and you can hear certain parts of the orchestra are over on your right and some are over on your left, and things feel further away, and there's this space that you go into, and I would listen to any kind of music the same way, in a sense, how a certain thing can happen in a certain way with a kind of certain timbre or a certain a kind of dynamics, and how it emotionally, so I always listened to records that way. And when I started listening to, more band sounding records, rock records and pop records and stuff, it's still the same thing. XTC is a huge favorite band of mine. And there's a kind of middle era from maybe 1983 to 89. Well, from 1983 on, where you listen to their records and the production decisions are I mean, it's the way people talk about the Beatles or the Beach Boys too. It's
sure,
certain ways of translating a song so that it has this impact for you, or it feels like this world that you go, you have an experience inside this song. So I always listened to records that way. And I always loved being in the studio, whether it was with GIs or Jawbox or anybody. And so I just was lucky that, I that people started to know that. And then, Kerosene 454 is the first band that ever asked me to go into the studio with them, because they had moved from California to DC, and I recommended, they were like, where should we record? We're ready to do our record. And I recommended the same studio that we had just done for Your Own Special Sweetheart at, with the same engineer, Drew Mazurek. And they were like, well, do you want to come along and just kind of help out? And I was like, yeah, of course I do. And, at that point, I'm just basically the guy who reminds them to tune up, and the guy who says, I mean, what if you did a harmony here? Or what if you doubled this part? Or, what if it was, just but basically kind of just a coach for the performance, and everything's happening really fast anyway. But and then Texas Is the Reason was the second band that asked me to do that, and I think that's because they were big Jawbox fans, and I had such a good time working with them. Same engineer, Drew Mazurek, same studio, and that studio is now where my studio is. Like that space is, I've been in that same space for going on probably 15 years now.
Wow.
But like, yeah, I really lucked out. It's my favorite room for drums and favorite place to make a record. So, and then it was just kind of a, like, they told two friends and they told two friends kind of thing. Like, Texas record was fun and it turned out good and they were happy and I was psyched about it. And they were friends with Promise Ring, and Promise Ring asked me to, so, and then Braid, and then it was all like, friends of friends. And I think maybe it worked out because I just, poured myself into it so much that, like, because I really do give a shit about how things turn out, and I think people have had experiences with engineers who had to make a calculus, especially with a fast record where you're like, oh, this band wants to record in 3 days, like, I'm sorry, man, I just came off tour. I'm exhausted. I'm not going to do a kamikaze mission. Right. And like, fair enough. Like I would do a kamikaze mission at that point. I was just like, whatever we need to make this great. Like, I just want to do it. And, so I think that might be part of it. I don't know, but I mean, and then I'm very lucky that, like, Ian, Donzi and Tara had a space at Inner Ear that was like the Studio B, and like a separate control room, but it's still tied into the main room. And so you could use all of Don's mics and use the space, but then you had your own little control room with gear in there for mixing and overdubs and stuff. And the guy that was the person who was running that space had decided to quit. And Ian knew that I had been recording bands in my basement, the basement of the Jawbox house, and people were happy with how those were turning out. And that was all just like 8-track stuff that a couple 7-inches came out of it. People released some things, but so Ian knew that I had been doing good stuff in my basement, and he suggested to Don, he's like, why don't you see if Jay wants to take over Studio B at Inner Ear? And Don really gave me, that was like a huge, immense break that he gave me, because I was able to use some of the great features of Inner Ear, but it was really cheap for people. And I did a lot of stuff in there for a few years, and then started working in the main room at Inner Ear on 2-inch tape. And it just was really a case of one thing leading to another. And like, then getting to travel more, like traveling to do that Roadside record at Robert Lang. That's an amazing studio. Crazy studio.
Yeah. Matt says hi, by the way. He just texted me. Matt Johnson he said hi.
Yeah. Oh, nice. But, so, so it was just a case of being really psyched and like just kind of ready to go, like ready to be wanting to be a part of something cool, like, and being to be invited along, so that, and just one thing leading to another. So
that's awesome. What, I know this is probably a difficult question, but I know you mentioned some of those records, but what, maybe name 3 that stand out to you that you, not so much.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I knew it would be.
I mean, it is.
I knew it would be.
It's total. It's pretty impossible at this point. I mean, I get that. I can
respect that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand. I totally get it.
I mean, it's usually the thing that I'm working on at the moment. Honestly,
what are you working on at the moment?
Like, there's a band in DC called Club USA that's kind of a really, really cool sort of kind of strange garage rock band with really, really good songs, a really excellent singer. Kind of, I mean, I wouldn't know what to compare them to, but like, it's like maybe they'd be at home playing with like John Spencer Blues Explosion. But
nice.
They're much more tuneful band. Just really, they're super, super cool band. Really, really love them. And I recorded them last month, and I'm just starting their mix today, actually. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, and I just mixed a record for Broadcaster, New York band, kind of sort of power pop-ish New York band. I mean, that's just like literally what's immediately, the two things that are kind of going on right now.
Yeah.
Band from Vermont called Goodnight Nobody. And then, there's other things that are sort of floating around. So
that's cool.
Yeah. I did the Sparta's putting out a record in March.
Oh, nice. He's such a good songwriter.
Them last year. Yeah. They're great. They're super fun to work with.
That's awesome, man. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, I know you can't predict the future, but what do you think the future looks like for you?
I can't predict the future. I just know I know what some of the next 10 months is going to look like, because I'm going on those sugar dates. I'm going to Japan in April. I have, music projects of my own and things that I'm going to work on. So traveling and playing music and recording music and, all of which is contingent on the Western world order not totally taking a shit, basically.
Yeah.
So it's, this is a terrible time to try to predict the future, because terrible people are trying to make the most terrible future imaginable for most of us. Mm-hmm. And so it's very hard to know. And I'm just trying to keep myself sane by focusing on things that I have some control over and trying to support the things that are positive,
Sure. Well, I've super enjoyed this conversation, Jay. Super honored to have you on. Again, thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability earlier. That was really, really, I know that's a lot to deal with. So I just wanted to thank you for your time. Thank you for all the music. I mean, I've been a fan of a ton of it, and I really appreciate you, taking that leap and writing those songs and putting those records out, just being a part of a lot of my life. And a lot of people probably listen to this podcast as well. So super honored to have you on, and I just really appreciate you spending time with me. Hey, listener, thank you so much for tuning in again and again. I really appreciate it. It's been an honor to be on this journey with you, so thank you again for listening week in and week out. If you'd like to add me on Instagram and Facebook at The Rumors Are Truecast. If you'd like to like and subscribe, you know the drill, guys, so thank you again for listening. Thank you to Jay Robbins. Super, super honored to have you on this podcast. Been a fan of your music for a very, very long time, as well as the production you've done on a lot of the records I've loved over the years. So thank you again to Jay Robbins. Got some incredible artists on the horizon, guys, and you know it. Nostalgia is still a heck of a drug. The podcast is produced by Wesley Hill, artwork by Jared Chase Bowser, and music by Brian Jarin. This episode is dedicated to the memory of my dear friend, producer, and man of many talents, Brian Jarin.